It's about people, performance, and purpose.
We are urging all nations to recognize the inherent right in the ocean.
Ocean governance concerns every one of us.
Take what you learned today with you. We have the tools, we have the technology.
Let's end the ocean emergency.
Mas nós fazemos parte desse ambiente.
Welcome to the Ocean Race Summit.
I am Danny Washington, your host for the day. We're so grateful that you all are here with us. Thank you. You could be anywhere else doing anything else, but yet you chose to be here, so thank you. One thing I did mention, I was going to look for the website or where you could see the documentary Shaped by Water that's featuring Zandy, Jess, and Charlie, who we saw in our panel a little bit earlier. You can head online. In fact, you can sign up for 11th Hour Racing's newsletter, and they will be announcing when next they'll be screening the film. So you just have to go to shapedbywater.11thhourracing.org, and that's where you can find out more information about the doc. So please be sure to do that so you can watch Shaped by Water. Welcome back, everybody. Okay, who's ready for the second part of our program? Yeah. All right, okay, I think you could do a little bit better than that. When I say ocean, you say rights. Ocean? Rights. Ocean? Rights. Yes, that's what we're here for today, to talk about ocean rights. And one of the things that will help us get there is looking at innovations that will help us better understand the ocean. I'm personally always interested in learning more about diversity and inclusion and how that impacts ocean health, but also how we can create more resilient coastlines through innovation and providing a more accessible way for people to connect with the ocean. So in this part of the program, we're going to take a deeper dive into some tangible actions and blue tech innovations that are scalable solutions for ocean health. And of course, the impact that it has on all of us, as well as the ultimate goal of recognizing the ocean's inherent rights. Now, one organization that is making big strides in the protection of the environment right here in Rhode Island is the Department of Environmental Management. I'm delighted to invite to the stage a lifelong Rhode Islander who grew up on the shores of Narragansett Bay, but also has spent his entire 34-year career at the department. Please join me in welcoming Terrence Gray to share the work that they're doing at the department. Hi, Terrence. Great to see you.
Thank you, Danny. Good morning, everybody. I want to thank 11th Hour Racing, Sail Newport, and of course the Ocean Race for putting this all together. We heard a little bit earlier this morning about the concept of racing with a purpose, and I think this summit that we're having this morning really talks about a stopover with a purpose. And it's great to have the opportunity to speak a little bit this morning about some of the work that's going on here in Rhode Island. Of course, when I was asked to speak on the agenda this morning, I was told that the themes are ocean health, Universal Declaration of Ocean Rights, as well as climate change. And I was like, all right, I have 5 minutes. Let's see what we can do with that. So using my time wisely, I wanted to take these global challenges and these global agendas and really kind of hone in on the ocean state. And what can we do, and what have we done in Rhode Island, but also what we can do individually to deal with all these things. I think when the debate about climate change was happening, and it took many years in Rhode Island to get our Act on Climate passed, there were kind of two perspectives that were clashing. One perspective was, we are small, and nothing that we do in the state is going to change the trajectory of those graphs that you saw earlier. We don't buy that, right? The other perspective was, we are mighty. And even though we are small, we have an opportunity to lead by example and show everybody in the United States and in the world how we can do it. We have a little over 1 million people. We have a really tight geographic focus that's centered by Narragansett Bay. So all of this stuff hits home. And we really need to focus on how we can make that happen. I'll start a little bit with plastics. So plastics is another global challenge that's really impacting our oceans. It's impacting our bays. It's impacting our rivers, all of our waterways. In 2018, one of the captains of one of the vessels sat right up here on a panel like you saw earlier, And she was talking about her voyage through the Southern Ocean. Now, a lot of times when you hear about sailors talk about the Southern Ocean, they talk about these crazy, challenging conditions, the weather. But the thing that's really hit home with me was the remoteness. And the way they described it was the nearest humans to them were actually in the space station when they were sailing in that Southern Ocean. And that remoteness really hit home. And the other thing that hit home was while they were out there sailing full speed through this very remote ocean, they were finding mylar balloons and other single-use plastics floating out there, which to me was horrible. The other thing that hit home was Janet actually gave me a copy of Narragansett National Geographic. Janet was famous for homework, right? Here, read this. Tell me what's in here. So they had a great issue on plastics, and I took a look at it, and inside there was a picture of the Mariana Trench, which is the deepest part of the Pacific Ocean. It's 36,000 feet deep, and at the base of that trench, there's a single-use shopping bag floating around. That was equally horrible. And I think we really had to look at that and say, what are we going to do about this? The other point, and these are the seeds, I think, that Richard talked about earlier. Some of these take root and really stick with you and make a point that you're thinking to yourself, I need to do something about this. The other piece on plastics that really hit home was a little factoid that came out. By 2050, if we stay on the pace that we're at, the amount of plastics in the ocean is going to exceed the biomass of the fish in our seas. That's frightening too. All of those things. We need to change that trajectory. And some of the things that Rhode Island's been doing is really trying to take little steps to limit the use of single-use plastics. We have the advantage of having some very strong leaders in our General Assembly, and we've had a sequence of governors that have been very supportive of this and have signed these bills into law. But there's steps to try and eliminate things like straws, eliminate things like mylar balloons, look at things like polystyrene takeout containers. There are viable replacements for all of these products that don't lead to the pollution that I talked about. Last year, we had a statewide ban on single-use plastic bags, and we are in the process of promulgating regulations to eliminate those across the state. So all of these are pretty powerful pieces. The General Assembly right now is debating how to deal with packaging, which is probably the single biggest source of plastic in our economy, as well as bottles and other types of polystyrene. About 30 minutes west of here at the University of Rhode Island, President Parlange has convened an international discussion on plastics. I was there yesterday. It was really eye-opening. There were representatives from like 4 continents that were really just talking about the different challenges they have from their perspectives. And I think all of them are committed to making a difference. One of the things you'll see when you walk around the event today is exactly what Richard spoke about earlier, which is 11th Hour Racing has, and this is what Charlie talked about too, 11th Hour Racing has stepped up to lead by example as well. This is a sustainable event, and there's a lot of lessons learned here. DEM hosts about 1,500 events, none of them as big or as significant as this, but some of them are pretty big. The Jazz Fest, the Folk Fest, there's a lot of charity walks, there's a lot of 5Ks. We're going to extend the lessons learned from 11th Hour Racing's commitment from this event out to as many of those events as we possibly can. And I think what that does is take a small footprint and start to pound a path. And I'm looking forward to that. The other piece that I wanted to touch on briefly is climate change. And most of our discussion on climate change, and I'm talking collectively, not just Rhode Island, is how it impacts us, right? Our weather's too hot. Our weather is unpredictable. It's more severe. Sea level rise is going to flood my street. But I don't think we should forget that sea level rise is having profound impacts on our oceans and our waterways. Janet touched on this a little bit this morning. It's impacting the chemistry of our oceans. it's impacting salinity, it's impacting temperature. And what that means is it's changing the character of our fisheries and our coastline communities. And that environmental impact can't be lost as we focus on the human impacts as well. In Rhode Island, we've taken some pretty aggressive actions. In 2021, the governor signed the Act on Climate as it was passed by the legislature. There's some of the leaders in this room that really made that happen, and I think that's commendable. It put us on a path for zero net emissions by 2050. And I think that commitment is really kind of groundbreaking, and it's going to be challenging to meet that. But then they followed that up with a commitment last year to amend our renewable energy standards. So Rhode Island is committed to 100% renewable energy by 2033, and also a commitment to go out and procure up to 1,000 megawatts of offshore wind to power our state. Offshore wind is an interesting discussion, and I like to think that offshore wind is a great example of how we can pivot from the challenges of climate change to the opportunities of climate change. And one of the things we've looked at is building ports and investing ports, not only to support our longstanding commercial fishing community, but also to really support the development of offshore wind. And that, coupled with just transition of our workforce, really can make this an economic opportunity, an economic bonanza for the state. I think with climate change and plastics, you also have to talk about water quality. With water quality, the state has literally invested billions of dollars in pollution control to protect Narragansett Bay. And that's showing dividends. A couple of years ago, we opened an area in Narragansett Bay that's been closed for 70 years for shell fishing. And that's because of better control of combined sewer overflows. There's another project in place right now, and I'm optimistic that that's going to lead to the opening of many, many more of those historically closed acres of the bay, and probably bring swimming to the upper bay. And what that does is it opens that waterway up to a whole new community, and with direct access. You talked about equal access to waters. That's so important, because people only will protect and appreciate what they experience. And I think those investments are going to pay dividend in the next couple of years. Finally, I just want to say how it's notable how public opinion has changed. A couple of years ago, it was the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, right? Everybody talks about the beginning of the Earth Day when our rivers were on fire, our rivers were open sewers, the waterways were terrible. Well, we've come a long way, and we can't forget to celebrate those successes. And as we've come a long way, people's environmental ethic has changed. Last spring, we had a 4-day release from one of our wastewater treatment plants into one of our rivers, and people were outraged. That's exactly the reaction we want to see, is people outraged with noncompliance and situations like that. The other thing is just the commitment that people have to Narragansett Bay. Danny mentioned that I grew up on the bay. I did. I was a little kid. I used to play around in those little sailboats and on the beach. Now I know the quality of the water where I was playing, and it makes me a little nervous, but that's a long time ago. But I do think that that people's commitment to our waterways, we can take that into ethic, and we can take that commitment that you see in Rhode Island to the bay and really show the world on how people can become dedicated to our waterways. So in summary, like Rhode Island, I think we all have a chance to be small but mighty. And I think we have the opportunity to exercise a little leadership and really push these big changes that we're talking about. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you, Terrence. And it's not little leadership, it's big leadership. This is a big ocean state, and we just really appreciate all the ways that you all are leading, and hopefully lots of other states in the U.S. and beyond will follow your lead, so thank you. When you mentioned the plastic bag in Mariana Trench, like that image, I've seen something like that, and it's wild to think about the fact that impacts of our behaviors are reaching those places that are untouched by humans, and ecosystems that have been untouched for thousands of years. So we've got to change that. And one of the reminders of that would be for you to look up. If you look above you, above your heads, there are images as well as artworks, thanks to the Schmidt Ocean Institute, that remind us of those deep seas and all the wonderful biodiversity that we need to to protect in those parts of the ocean. Now, with that said, as a message that we've said all day today, we are interconnected, and what happens on land, our behaviors here do impact the ocean and vice versa. We've all learned that a small drop in the ocean can create ripples and then can lead to big waves, and we hope that you are those waves. Now, small collective actions can add up, and when we see that and we look through the lens of our soil and how we get our nourishment, our food, and also protect and restore the soil, well, it has a huge impact on the ocean as well. We really appreciate Clean Ocean Access for sharing their story with us today, especially the stories of the young people in schools locally here in Rhode Island doing the composting thing. You know, this is something that we can all do at home. It just takes a bit of effort, but again, it's a wonderful way for you as an individual to connect with the soil and go back to our roots as human beings, connecting with the soil that nourishes us every day. Now, here at the Ocean Race, we are committed to recognizing ocean rights. The Geneva process is led by a core team of experts who are creating draft principles for the United Nations, which we will present in a potential Declaration of Universal Ocean Rights to the General Assembly this September in New York. Now, yes, round of applause for that. One of our wonderful partners, Earth Law Center, they have been such a critical, just entity that has helped guide this process. And all of their policy experts have been so supportive. One of those experts is Michelle Bender, who's not here with us today, but she helped establish the Ocean Rights Framework in 2017 because after lots of research, we realized that the right of nature laws that are established currently around the world excluded marine life and marine ecosystems for the most part. It was something like 5% of those laws included marine ecosystems, which is wild. But Michelle helped close that gap. Now, another key person from Earth Law Center who's here with us today, helping make headway, massive headway in this process, is ocean science and policy analyst Rachel Bustamante. Please help me in welcoming Rachel to the stage to tell us more about her work at Earth Law Center.
Thank you, Danny, and good morning, dear colleagues and friends. I come to you from coastal North Carolina and the stolen lands of the Catawba people. Research increasingly shows that how we value and relate to the ocean shapes how we manage human activity in the marine environment. As a member of the next generation of ocean advocates, I am encouraged by the emerging pathway of recognizing the ocean as a living entity with inherent rights. Ocean rights is a holistic approach that helps us shift our relationship with the ocean. So rather than just using resources or claiming ownership, we start to see the ocean as an interconnected ecosystem of our planet that we rely on and that we care for. So we make decisions that consider what the ocean needs and all the life that the ocean supports. And this stems from the rights of nature movement and draws on indigenous practices where understandings of this mutual dependence with nature can guide our governance in a more holistic way. And the rights of nature movement is rapidly growing around the world with more than 200 laws and policies now in place across 30 countries and dozens of local examples in the United States. So for example, recently in Washington State, 5 cities and 3 counties have passed proclamations recognizing the inherent rights of the southern resident orcas. As another example, Ecuador recognized the rights of nature constitutionally in 2008. And since then, we have seen court cases criminalizing shark fishing in the Galapagos, where this marine reserve is actually guided by principles to help create an equilibrium among society, the economy, and nature. We at Earth Law Center are committed to supporting communities and governments around the world, including here in Rhode Island, to advance policies and legislation, ranging from species-level conservation to national and international levels. And another example is Panama's national law, which recognizes nature's right to exist and to restoration, and requires the state to actually prevent activities like unsustainable fishing that could threaten the survival of species. And another law that followed that recognizes sea turtles' rights to live and move freely in a healthy environment, to be free of pollution or harm from incidental capture or coastal development. And in fact, the United Nations recognizes we need a change in the way we view, manage, and use the ocean. We stand at a critical turning point for ocean health and increasing demands for shifts from business as usual, for more stewardship, for transformative approaches that address the root causes of our environmental challenges, and for living in harmony with nature. And we know this learning is not new. As we know, many indigenous and coastal communities have long practiced reciprocal relationships with the ocean. But to improve our global relationship and help meet the challenges of the UN Ocean Decade, we need to find ways to balance our activities with the needs and the limits of the ocean. Ocean health is human health, and if the ocean wins, we all win. And we can work towards both fulfilling human rights and promoting the blue economy while still preserving the ecological integrity of the ocean. And today, the government of Cabo Verde is taking the lead in a global initiative to create this positive relationship with the ocean through the adoption of a Universal Declaration of Ocean Rights by 2030, with support from other governments and in partnership with the Ocean Race, Earth Law Center, and many others. And our aim is to develop a collective strategy, gathering governmental support and welcoming new partners from around the world. Our process is to work in solidarity with existing ocean governance agendas, so we seek synergy and collaboration to strengthen our implementation. And I ask you, if we were to envision a global platform of values or principles or a guiding ethic for the ocean, what would that look like to you? I think we must listen deeply to each other and to the ocean and amplify diverse ways of knowing. Even the High Seas Treaty urges us to step up as stewards and conserve the integrity and the inherent value of biodiversity. And Rachel Carson's words remind us that we must shed our human perceptions to enter into a universe of all-pervading water. For me, the ocean is a source and a space of peace and mental rest, and I'm dedicated to ensuring a thriving ocean future. I especially thank the Ocean Race for our partnership towards this goal and thank 11th Hour Racing for their support of the summit and our Ocean Rights Initiative. And I say let's take action for ocean rights, embrace a holistic approach to ensure the ocean thrives. We owe it not just to ourselves, but also for the millions of species that call the ocean home. Thank you.
We really appreciate your hard work and all the effort that you all are putting in at the Earth Law Center. We couldn't do this without you. So that extremely important insight that you just shared with us will lead us toward a Universal Declaration of Ocean Rights, and I'm excited about that possibility. Now, last Tuesday, a historic moment happened right here in Rhode Island at the State House where an important resolution was passed. Truly a historic moment, since this is the first time in history in the United States that a state assembly has recognized the rights of natural communities and ecosystems. And of course, that includes the ocean, which makes sense because we're in the ocean state. We'd like to give a big thank you to Representatives Lauren Carson and Terry Courtfriend, who are with us today, and for you just doing the action of bringing this vote to the State House floor. Thank you very much. And yes, please, round of applause for Terry and Lauren. I'm also thrilled to share with you that both Lauren and Terry have committed to exploring the inherent rights of nature and the ocean with the intention of bringing further proposals to the House in its next session in January, so keep an eye out for that. Now, we know that nature's rights are intrinsically connected to human rights, especially when we talk about frontline communities that are directly impacted by the climate crisis. Comprehensive human rights are not possible unless we give nature its rights as well, not only in the US, but globally. Recognizing ocean rights is a part of the solution, and here to discuss some more ocean health solutions from technology and policy, I'd love to invite our next panel to the stage, starting off with Professor Maria Rosa, who's an assistant professor of biology at Connecticut College. Great to see you. Hi. Next, we have Dr. Dennis Yancey. He's the co-founder and CEO of Marauder Robotics. Welcome, Dr. Yancey. I'm shaking hands up here. I gotta shake yours. There we go. Next, we have Dr. Elizabeth Mendenhall, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Marine Affairs at the University of Rhode Island. Good to see you. And finally, we have Layla Devine from the Youth Leadership Council and Board of Directors, member at Earth Echo International. Hello. Let's have a seat. Everyone's looking great up here. Thank you for being here with us today at the Ocean Race Summit. We really appreciate your time. So we're going to jump into it because we want to keep on our time schedule. But Maria, I want to begin with you. Okay, we just saw this video about the Resilient Rhode Island Act and the need for resilient coastlines here dealing with sea level rise and climate change. You've been working on a very interesting project recently called Camel's Reef using reef balls. How did this project come about, and how can it help with resilient coastlines?
Thanks, Annie. So the project started because I'm a marine ecologist, and the first thing I did when I started at Connecticut College was go down to the waterfront. I was not impressed. Connecticut College is the only NESCAC school that has its own waterfront access. We have sailing teams, rowing teams, but the shoreline just was underutilized. We've seen about 4 feet of loss to our waterfront in terms of the land that's there and available. And a lot of our students, even though they've been there for 4 years, I had some seniors, they've never been down to the waterfront. New London County historically has not had access, the communities, local communities, to the waterfront, even though we have an arboretum, which is a public space. So here's this great location that no one could access, no one knew about. So I saw it and I said, there's something to do about that. And I'm very stubborn, as anyone who knows me. And I started looking around for things to do. And one of the things is living shorelines. So working with living shorelines, which takes into consideration community engagement. And in this case, using the reef balls because they attenuate wave energy, so it prevents more erosion. And then I can use student labor, which is really cheap, to build the reef balls and help put together the shoreline.
Oh, that's fantastic. And how many years ago did this begin?
I started in 2018, then started collecting data 2019. We all know what happened the year after that and the year after that. So I started putting it together in 2021.
Fantastic. And just a reminder for all our panelists, we are competing with some sounds outside. Oh. Good sounds, kids talking and to each other, but make sure to bring your mic all the way up to your mouth. Thank you. Maria, one more question for you to follow up. So what are some of the results that you've seen so far with the reef balls when it comes to biodiversity as well as community engagement along the coastline?
So I could talk for hours about the biodiversity. If anybody wants to come over, I will happily geek out about the pipefish and the eels and all the organisms that we're finding. But as I mentioned, the most important part has been the community engagement. The buy-in from the students, they get to build something, and they get to put it in the water, and they get to say, I did that, I helped. So as an educator, we talked about all the issues, all the problems. I teach all day about how horrible things are, the microplastic pollution, the eutrophication, and it gets really, really hard, right? It's a hard weight to educate our students about this and to tell them how bad things are. So having that positive aspect of things are bad, but here's something you can do about it, and seeing them get engaged with that and actually doing it, that to me has been the best part of this project.
Beautiful. Thank you, Maria. That sounds very interesting. And can you snorkel on these reef balls? Or is it shallow, deep? What are we looking at?
They're intertidal. Anyone who's familiar with Connecticut maritime law will know that trying to get something subtidal, especially when you talk about navigational waters, we have the Coast Guard next to us, and then all the Navy's nuclear submarines get built across from us. So anytime I get in the water, there's like a Navy guy like, what are you doing?
Okay, so it's highly monitored. Yes. Okay. Thanks, Maria. Dennis, I'd love to move on with you if that's cool with you. So diving deeper about further into the water, underwater, you created Marauder Robotics, which is a fantastic group. You've created a lot of scalable solutions for ocean health. Can you tell us about those?
Well, first, an interesting fact is that we're building an ocean tech company in a ironically landlocked city, Atlanta, Georgia. We're building this platform for marine managers that's robotically enabled and remotely operated. And we're applying this to ocean restoration, particularly urchin barren restoration. And what urchin barrens form because there's a decline in natural predators. We overfish them, we overhunt them, we disease, climate change, and what it does is cause kelp forests to collapse. Marine managers are applying divers to this situation. They're sending them down armed with hammers, of all things, and they're scouring this seafloor. And, you know, it's not scalable. It's not sustainable. It's not economically viable. And that's where automation comes in. We bring automation technology to the marine manager, and You know, we bring this to the marine manager, and this is allow them to remove the diver from the water, and it allow them to actually reduce the cost that it requires to actually do this work. It reduces the time from years to months, and then it expands the area that they can cover.
Now, Dennis, question for you. So just to give a little more context, perhaps for people who are not familiar with kelp forests, but what we're dealing with right now because of the climate crisis and changes in the ecosystem, we're seeing urchin barrens, am I correct in saying that? Where there
Yes.
are urchins eating the holdfast of the kelp, therefore destroying the forest?
Yes.
So these marine managers are going down with these hammers and they have to remove the urchins essentially, right?
Yes, they're actually reducing them manually by using divers.
Right, which is the process that your robotics company can then address.
We automate that, and we're able to give them the tools that allow them to actually expand their work.
Fantastic. Now, are there any other projects that your devices or your robots or your platform, how does it contribute to climate and resilient coastlines?
Automation gets us into the water. Data keeps us there. And what we notice is that a lot of the marine managers, they don't have enough data in real time. And by putting this device on the seafloor, we're able to send it to the cloud directly to their laptop, their phone, and they can see what's happening on the seafloor in real time and make high impact decisions on how to deploy limited resources. These limited resources are asked to contribute more, do more, and the only way you can do that is with automation.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Dennis. That sounds really interesting. We'll come back to you in just a moment. Now, Layla, I'm jumping over to you. We're not going in seat order, but I want you to talk about your leadership. You raised your hand earlier as one of the only 21-year-olds. I know you're probably used to that, being the youngest in the audience, but we just want to commend you for your work, and especially the work that you're doing with Earth Echo, which is a great organization co-founded by one of my dear friends, Philippe Cousteau, who I've known for over 15 years. What's your role with them currently?
Yeah, so kind of a little background on the advocacy work that I do. I'm currently a rising junior at Barnard College of Columbia University, and I'm studying a variety of things that I kind of like to call this marriage of disciplines that actively shape my advocacy work. Predominantly, I'm a scientist, so I study molecular biology, but to accompany that, I'm also looking at science and public policy and anthropology. And at Earth Echo, I'm a youth leadership council and board of directors member. And really, the goal of Earth Echo International is really to protect and restore our ocean planet, specifically by putting youth at the forefront of a lot of those conversations and at a lot of these events to drive that policy and to be able to reach out and be active change makers in their own community. And so with me, I like to call a lot of my advocacy work as scientific storytelling. I'm originally from Hilo, Hawaii. So for me, something that was really prominent in the work that I did at the time, which was focused on marine pharmacology, which specifically looks at how can we sustainably utilize our reefs to derive novel compounds from them that could be used to combat things like cancer, of all else. And so really what my work focused on doing is how can we tie this back to the community level? There's this huge issue in science where we see research being done that's absolutely amazing, and then it gets published, and then it just kind of like sits there in this little ball of like academia journalism that just, is only read by other scientists. But the really important part, right, is public understanding. How does everyone here understand the work that we're doing, and how can we use that to drive a lot of these initiatives forward locally and also universally? And so my work with Earth Echo, specifically putting youth at the forefront of those conversations, and my perspective is that of a scientific storyteller, but also there are so many other people and so many other young people that are focused on different disciplines that are also driving a lot of this work forward.
Well, you're certainly speaking my language. I love science storytelling. That is a passion. But as someone who's studying and continuing to build on your career, why do you think it's so important to include STEM professionals, but as well as STEM students in this conversation about coastal resilience and making sure that we protect the ocean?
Yeah, so something that I like to say a lot is that environmental problems are people problems. So they're really just kind of rooted in all of us and where we stand. And something that's really important, right, as to where scientists stand in a lot of this is how can we make our work how can we communicate that on that different level to emphasize coastal resilience and to emphasize a lot of these things. And for me, that really is just focused on not only publishing your work and putting that out there, but also being active members in your community and finding those initiatives that can allow you to actually bring that work across, right? And so, for me personally, I like to look at the youth voice in perspective with science, but also how youth can be a driver for a lot of that. For me, I think that youth are really critical in this conversation in the sense that we're the upcoming and active change makers in a lot of this. And what we see is that youth can actually, not only are we entering a lot of these disciplines, but we are altering them as we enter them. And I think that's something that's really important to take into consideration, is we're not just kind of sitting in this active discipline, but we're altering it as we enter them. And so for me, I've done several analysis on different anti-colonial protocols that could be used in terms of restoration, in terms of scientific practices. For me, that has always taken place in sampling. So one of the things that I do in my research is I scuba dive and I actually collect those coral samples. How can you remain this subjective and objective balance where you're actually assessing reef health and knowing to collect from those healthier areas, but also getting that range of samples that you're looking for, because there are standards for what viability means in a lot of this research, and that's often focused around getting that range of samples. And so looking at things like that and altering those frameworks as we go, as youth and as young people, for me has always been something that's extremely important in my work.
Brilliant. Thank you, Layla. No, that's wonderful. Now, we're going to jump from science over a little bit to politics and policy. And Elizabeth, I'm very excited to talk to you about this and to hear your perspective. So your work focused on policy and international politics around the ocean. We saw a lot of big things happen this year so far, including the High Seas Treaty, which passed. What hope can that give us, and what concrete actions and solutions will it provide in areas beyond our national jurisdiction, our 200 nautical mile jurisdiction, that's different to what we already have, which could include something like the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which already is established?
Yeah, thanks for the question. First, I've got to say, the rest of the panel is so cool.
Right?
So yeah, we have a new treaty, and that's great. But we are at the end of the beginning at this point, and a lot more needs to be done by countries to activate, animate, and implement this treaty if it's going to achieve its goals. But some things to highlight. First is that the treaty creates new financial mechanisms for capacity building for developing states to get more people involved in using the ocean, but also monitoring and managing the ocean. Second, the treaty creates a new process for designating marine protected areas out in the middle of the ocean, which we didn't have before. Third is a requirement for sort of a baseline, default, any activity you do out in the middle of the ocean has to have an environmental impact assessment first. And the last thing I would highlight is that for the first time ever, there are obligations for existing institutions to coordinate with one another. So right now and into the future, we have different institutions that govern fishing, shipping, and mining. And that kind of isolation of managing one activity at a time is going to continue, which is a real challenge. Mm-hmm. But this treaty creates obligations for its members and for states that are members of these other institutions to try to coordinate so that it would be possible to say, hey, in this part of the ocean, we're going to prevent or control multiple types of use activities. So there's a lot to work with here, but it won't work on its own. We need to keep the pressure on for countries to perform environmental impact assessments, propose and designate marine protected areas, and actually work themselves to do this coordination between institutions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Elizabeth. I mean, I know when the headlines hit the news not too long ago about the High Seas Treaty, a lot of people were like, woo, yay, we did it. But what do we do? Nobody really was explaining it clearly in layman's terms. So
there was a lot of misinformation.
Yeah. Thank you for breaking that down for us so clearly. Now, obviously, there are many different factors we have to consider when we look at ocean rights and how to achieve that. What do you think is fitting right now with our current ocean policy systems to help us get there, perhaps, in the future, the near future?
Yeah, the topic of giving the ocean rights as an entity honestly does not fit within the contemporary ocean governance regime. The 200 laws and policies that the previous speaker mentioned that do give parts of nature rights all exist within domestic legal systems. So that's great, and there are opportunities there, but it's a little challenging to scale up to the international law of the sea. Because international law of the sea, contemporary ocean governance, it recognizes two categories of actors, public and private. Public actors are sovereign states that exercise jurisdiction over private actors in their capacity as flag states, coastal states, and port states. Private actors can be much more diverse, but what they have in common is that they're under the jurisdiction and control of a sovereign state. And so if you just try to insert another actor or another subject or entity into the system of decision-making about ocean uses, it's most likely that with the system we have, it would just be added to the list of stakeholders whose interests need to be considered in decision-making. But stakeholders' interests are, they're to be considered, but they typically don't drive decision-making about ocean use activities. And so to insert ocean rights into this system, you're butting up against existing freedoms of access for private actors managed by public actors. And so the idea of inserting the ocean into this system, it doesn't quite fit, which doesn't mean it's not a good initiative. It just means we need to think about how this is a first step to reconfiguration that can actually change how we make decisions about ocean uses.
Absolutely, and that's important. We need to have conversations like this to talk about the challenges that we're facing as we pursue this potential goal. But yeah, there are realities that we must face and address. So thank you for bringing that up. And I'd love to move on to Maria, if you have something to say from a scientist's perspective as a marine ecologist. Do you recognize the ocean as an entity, and how can your solutions add value to helping establish ocean rights?
Thanks. So thinking about ocean rights is a little bit different for me, because the ocean, I have a relationship in two ways. One, as a person, and other people have spoken about it, the ocean is where I feel at home, right? You walk into the water and it just feels great. So there's that aspect of it. And then as an educator and a marine ecologist, you have to think about how to protect it. So I think about the ocean as, we talk about providing ecosystem services. So it's everything that it does for us, and it's free, right? It doesn't send us an invoice. So one of the things I like to teach, and economists sometimes talk about this, is what is the value of nature? Can you put a monetary value on it? And if we do, does that mean then that people are more willing to protect it because they know this is how much it will cost every time your stormwater gets into the system? This is how much it costs every time you throw a plastic back into the water, right? So if we think about that and us being stewards of the ocean, to me, that's a stronger relationship in terms of protecting it. So the idea of it having rights is something that I still haven't really thought through, but I definitely agree that we have, as stewards of the ocean, we have a responsibility to protect it and to pay back all the services that it gives us.
Absolutely. We have to put a monetary value on it to see the true intrinsic value. Absolutely. Now, thank you for that, Maria. Dennis, do you have anything to add here? Your company is a private company, and it's, part of our system, but what do you have to contribute here?
The main thing that I have to contribute is that rights without enforcement are no rights at all. Mm-hmm. And that's where technology can provide continuous data, how to validate these rights and why we use the ocean and the value that we gain from it. Technology can also automate enforcement as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dennis. And we're going to wrap up here with Leila. Can you just end us off with your perspective on ocean rights being recognized, and how important do you think it is to have, of course, diverse youth voices involved in this process?
Yeah, so for me, growing up in Hawaii, I was obviously very connected to the ocean. My father was the one that inspired me to go diving and snorkeling for the first time, and it's been history ever since. He always said something that stood out to me when I was first learning how to dive, and it was take nothing but pictures and leave nothing but bubbles. And I think it's just a great way that I have always approached the ocean, and it's something where, as a scientist, it's hard to find the balance between, morals and ethics where you're doing your research and how that's actively impacting the world around you. Like, the issue with single-use plastics and science practice and protocol alone is horrendous. Like the amount of plastic that each person goes through every single day is just, it's terrible. And when you're looking at doing this marine-based research, but also you're using all of this plastic, it's really hard to be able to find that balance, right? And I think the first step for all scientists is to acknowledge their practice and protocol and look at the ocean as something with its own entity. Because without that, then, our connection between science and nature that society has always viewed as so critical to move forward with a lot of these initiatives, they aren't living up to their names, and they aren't carrying out that moral and ethic responsibility that we have to continue forward as a society. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I look at it. We need to acknowledge the ocean as an entity with its own rights and acknowledge that we are operating within the ocean structure.
Thank you, Layla. Yeah, that's brilliant. And I'm just so appreciative of your voice being here today. We definitely need to add more youth voices like yours in the room. So invite your friends to the next summit, please.
Most definitely.
Okay, great. Thank you all for your valuable contributions. I wish we could continue talking, and this conversation has been wonderful, but please be sure to speak to our panelists once we break off a little bit later. Thank you all very much. And also, Elizabeth, have to acknowledge, same nail polish color. I think we were like in sync today. Yeah, I love it. On brand, I love it. All right, well, please, let's give a warm thank you again to our panelists today. Thank you all so much. Thank you. So now I want to just do a temperature check. How are we feeling? Feeling good? This breeze is glorious. We are wrapping up. We have just a few more bits of our program today, but thank you all for your focused attention. We really, really appreciate it. So another leading organization that's dedicated to ocean research, exploration, and education is the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Robert Munier, who is the Vice President for Marine Facilities and Operations at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. Great to see you. Thanks, Robert.
It's good morning. It's great to be with a room full of people that love the ocean. I'm very lucky I get to do that every day. Woods Hole Oceanographic is located about 33 miles as the ship sails up the coast in Massachusetts, the Bay State, with 1,500 miles of coastline. But we collaborate very, very closely with lots of institutions in Rhode Island, including the Graduate School of Oceanography at URI, where we together are part of the East Coast Oceanography Consortium and also host the Ocean Exploration Cooperative Institute. And we work very closely with NOAA Fisheries, particularly on some of the projects that Administrator Coit mentioned, the North American right whale and the ropeless lobster traps. So many of you have come from across the globe, and we're global too. Our mission is to understand the ocean and to communicate that understanding with the public. Understand the ocean, that's a pretty audacious idea, like sailing around the world. Our first research vessel was a tall ship, the Atlantis, and it sailed the globe, as does our current fleet, now equipped with robots, submersibles, and a host of other tools that take scientists to survey, sample, observe, explore, and discover. Even with these high-tech platforms, it seems the more we learn, the more we realize how little we know. One thing we do know, the study of the ocean is the study of climate. At Woods Hole, we're all in, all 1,500 of us, trying to understand the role that the ocean plays in Earth's climate system. Climate change is not a problem for future generations. It's a defining challenge. It's our defining challenge today. The planet is on track to exceed 1.5 degrees temperature increase before 2050 unless we take robust, meaningful steps for the balance of this decade. The ocean may be able to help. The ocean is a vast natural repository for carbon. Over the last century, it has absorbed nearly a third of the carbon dioxide that humans have emitted into the atmosphere burning fossil fuels. This carbon ends up dissolved in water, captured by organisms, folded into coastal sediments, or in the deep sea. The ocean does this naturally, and there's a growing excitement and investment in the potential to enhance these natural processes to leverage the ocean as a climate solution, because the ocean is perhaps the single greatest potential source for scalable ocean carbon dioxide removal on the planet. The technologies needed to realize this vision are still in their infancy, although there's a gold rush of activity and venture capital investment in solutions ranging from iron fertilization to seaweed. We're not advocating for or against carbon dioxide removal, but deployment of such strategies requires understanding of their long-term viability and potential for the negative impacts on the environment, like ocean acidification. This can only be done by establishing scientifically credible baselines and then monitoring continuously in real time to observe and measure change. We must know if these solutions work, how well they work, and what their unintended consequences might be. And we have to know these things before there's an armada of tech startups start deploying interventions at a large scale. To fill this critical need, the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution is pleased to announce our vision for a new era in ocean observation. Working with partners in philanthropy, industry, and peer institutions around the globe, we aim to establish a large-scale, full ocean depth carbon observatory of approximately 1 million square kilometers. This network of networks, which we're calling the Ocean Vital Signs Network, OVSN, will be an ocean Internet of Things comprised of moorings, underwater vehicles, floats, oceanographic sensors, and communication systems. It will provide the rigorous and independent measurement, data, reporting, and verification needed to understand the efficacy of ocean climate-based solutions. It will leverage our strengths in ocean science, engineering, and marine operations to illuminate the ocean's water column from the surface to the seafloor, and its pivotal role in our planet's climate as never before. Our conceptual planning is done. Our scientific goals are: 1, track and quantify carbon as it moves from the atmosphere through the oceans. Number 2, quantify the effects, both intentional and unintended, of efforts to enhance carbon uptake in the ocean. And 3, identify and measure key ocean vital signs, measurements that can be used to assess the health of marine ecosystems. We're now focusing on the next phase of OVSN, ramping up the project team, creating a scientific ecosystem, developing the necessary technologies, preparing a concept of operations, engaging policymakers, and establishing a strategic communications plan. This effort will set the stage for deployment initially as a prototype and subsequently at scale. OVSN can be an important resource for ocean rights stakeholders. Always on, always connected, it'll provide the data, the persistent presence needed to define and advance our understanding of the ocean as an entity in its own right. It will speak up for the ocean. It will provide the environmental intelligence. OVSN is an unprecedented undertaking which will require unprecedented financial commitment. We're encouraged by the seed funding we've already received and are confident that we'll be able to leverage these early successes to major investments from philanthropy, foundations, and government. OVSN is big, and we need partners. We hosted, along with a dozen academic institutions and NGOs, including the Ocean Race, the first ever ocean pavilion at COP27 in Egypt last November, attracting over 15,000 delegates and leaders from all over the world to talk about the importance of the ocean to climate and climate solutions. At last, the ocean is taking its rightful place in the center of the global climate conversation, and we'll be at COP28 in Dubai to continue making the case. The ocean has the potential to help solve the climate crisis. Scientific understanding of carbon cycling in the ocean is limited, and our ability to monitor and measure the effects of intentional interventions in the carbon cycle are all but non-existent at the scale required. OVSN will change this, opening the door to scalable ocean-based solutions while protecting the ocean for future generations, and there is urgency to get started. Without it, we are sailing blind. Thank you.
So yesterday I had an opportunity to take a tour with some of our Summits team, as well as Richard at the Ocean Hour Farm, which is just up the road here. Thanks to 11th Hour Racing for creating this beautiful space, a regenerative farm that's really a proof of concept of what the future could look like when it comes to agriculture and us living with the land. And it was really just beautiful to see that coming together. And today I'm so excited to introduce and welcome to the stage a marvelous ocean champion who is leading the way in this space. She's the president and co-founder of the Schmidt Family Foundation and the Schmidt Ocean Institute, but she's the co-founder of 11th Hour Racing. Please give a warm welcome to Wendy Schmidt. So good to see you.
What we're doing here together is making a difference in less than a decade. And we can say there's a lot more to do, of course there is, but together we have actually changed the conversation. Wherever you come from, whatever your occupation, you could be part of the change toward a world that works in harmony with the natural world on land and in the ocean, eliminating waste and protecting the finite resources of the planet. 1 degree at a time is what we say at 11th Hour Racing. 1 degree at a time, we can address the harmful legacy of extractive and polluting industries that have led the world to its current existential crisis, where the Earth is rapidly losing its topsoils and their fertility, the biodiversity of millions of years of evolution, the stable chemistry of our ocean, all of which we depend on for our own survival. So I want to thank you so much for being part of this today and for coming here, being part of Racing with Purpose. And let's go forward, sailing towards the next mark, 1 degree at a time.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Your clear vision and powerful leadership really means a lot, and we know you have a very full schedule, so thank you for being here in person today. We appreciate it. Now, to take us home and knock it out the park, we've got my dear friend and colleague at the Summits team, Lucy Hunt, who is the Senior Advisor for the Ocean Race Summits and Learning Program. Please welcome Lucy Hunt to the stage.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. And thanks very much, Wendy, for the powerful speech. It's great to recap on all the positive work that we've been able to do, and it wouldn't have been possible without 11th Hour Racing. So we are forever grateful. So, Nelson Mandela once said, "Sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does." And we really do see that with the Ocean Race. Today, we're united with great people doing amazing work for the ocean and sharing concrete solutions. Whether it is making the ocean more accessible and creating young ocean advocates, like Zandy and Maria so eloquently spoke about earlier, or innovative tech that can help the balance of ocean health, like Dr. Yancey's Marauder Robotics, or keeping a watchful eye on new developments at the intersection of ocean and climate, like Rob shared. Thank you all for sharing your work and passion, and helping to inspire change and further ocean action. It is clear there is a lot of positive work happening here, so thank you. We have seen some bold decisions in support of the ocean's rights by the state of Rhode Island and municipality of Newport. Thank you, Representatives Carson and Courtfriend and Mayor Say. We now need to take one more step and bring this boldness to the international stage. We need a renewed global ethical framework for the relation between humankind and the ocean, which recognizes the inherent rights of the ocean, a universal declaration of ocean rights. It is essential that we develop a deeper connection with the land and water that surrounds us, that we are part of, and acknowledge these ecosystems with reverence and wonder. Understanding the importance of a reciprocal relationship like many Indigenous communities do, as Dina Lynn mentioned earlier. We, the Ocean Race, and partners around the globe, such as Earth Law Center here in the US, are convinced that the ocean must have a say, must be heard, and have clear influence on decisions that are impacting all of us. This is a major shift in perspective from the ocean as a source to be exploited, changed to the ocean as having the right to health, protection, and regeneration, where we as humans are careful users and stewards of what the ocean brings us, protecting what is protecting us, the ocean. Here you have the chance to be in the forefront of this both nationally and internationally. And so, who else would be better flag bearers than the ocean state? As Mandela said, sport has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. Newport Stopover is an excellent example of this, and we all know that collaboration is key. I invite you all to join us, stand up, speak up, and unite for the recognition of the ocean's inherent rights.
Thank you, Lucy. Wow. Okay, you need to turn. Can you turn to your neighbor and just say, "The race is on"? The race is on. The race is on. I hope that this day, today's summit, has served as inspiration for you, but also just knowledge and things that you need to understand for the future and how we can all contribute. And so I want to say thank you to each and every one of you for being here today at the Ocean Race Summit Newport. It's been an honor being your host. I'm Danny Washington, and it's just been such a joy to be in community with you today. Also, we want to thank all of our fantastic speakers who contributed and shared their valuable wisdom with us. We've learned so much from our speakers, so thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, thank you to Wendy Schmidt and the 11th Hour Racing team, the race's premier partner, as well as the founding partner of our sustainability program. And I also want to extend gratitude to Wendy's co-founders as well, Jeremy and Rob. Thank you for being here, and thank you for all of your support. So I think where I would take it from here is that this summit means the world because it's a moment to gather, it's a moment to have conversations, and as I mentioned in the beginning, it's meant to create real connections and hopefully blossom into new collaborations. So make sure you chat with each other at the end here when we have our lunch, where you can just see where it can go. You never know who you'll meet in here. And let's actively envision our future together, the future that we want, the future that we need, where we're in harmony with nature. It's only going to happen if we use our brilliant minds to create that vision and to actively pursue it. We'd love to hear about your experience today, so let us know what you thought. How did you feel? What stood out to you? Maybe what didn't work for you, but share it with us. We really would love to know. We have a feedback form that you can fill out simply by scanning the QR code, and which should be on these screens on the side here. And again, it'll only take a few moments for you to do. We have ocean bottles for everybody who finishes that feedback form, and one lucky winner will get an official Ocean Race hat, a cap, to take home with you, and we'll announce that name a little bit later. Now, it's time to take action, and a few more thank yous before we go. Again, thank you to our host city partners, Sail Newport and 11th Hour Racing, for working together to make this summit happen. The entire summits team, you know who you are. Thank you, thank you, thank you. As well, of course, a big thank you to our race chairman, Richard Brisius. Thank you very much. Our friends, yes, a round of applause. Thank you, Richard. Our friends at the Earth Law Center, thank you for your partnership. Thanks to our tech and AV team on the side. They've been working away to make sure this runs smoothly. Thank you to the Ocean Race staff who's in the room right now. You'll see them with their shirts on, and our volunteers who have helped support the summit today. Also, immense gratitude for all of our esteemed speakers once again, and our sailors. Thank you to Charlie, thank you to 11th Hour Racing team, and all the teams that are a part of this amazing ocean race. We appreciate your contributions, and we hope that the future of the ocean, will continue to, the message of the future of the ocean will continue to move forward with you as we finish up the race. And finally, thank you to each of you, our ocean friends, and now hopefully our ocean family, as you take our messages that we talked about today throughout the world. So now we'd like to invite you. Thank you. Thanks, Richard. No, it's been a joy to be here with you. I'm looking forward to having conversations at lunch with hopefully many people. But yeah, make sure and stick with us. We've got a lot coming. The race is still on. Keep track of what's happening. And now we'd like to invite you to stick around for networking and lunch. And after that, during the lunch period, we will have a special ceremony. We'd love for you to stick around for that.